And if there's anything new anybody'd like to discuss or add, this would be the time to do so.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Ginger, yes.
Yeah. So I have a question, I guess maybe for Jeff, and that I was wondering if the composition of the lawns, I mean, the grass that they plant probably needs fertilizing, if there was any value to asking for a mix with more clover that also fixes nitrogen, or if that would just make things worse, or who might be able to tell us about that idea.
So if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Just through you. So we've talked a lot about different seed mixes over time, Ginger. And I know there are a number of landscaping companies that have kind of been converting lawns over in certain areas and for clients that are interested, and kind of changing not just the type of grass or the type of variant that they use, but also kind of incorporating some of our native grasses. And in some cases, I know a few spots where, especially on more, less used areas, switching over to some mixes that do include things like more clover to try to create a less maintenance of intensive lawn for a lot of different reasons. And I know some of the larger companies too have been really kind of working towards creating kind of a lawn seed blend for the lawn types that don't require the same amount of irrigation or fertilizer that some of the, traditional, bluegrass or Bermuda grass lawns that people have kind of always liked. There's so many different varieties now, and they're becoming much more available that are much more water and nutrient tolerant. So I think that's something that if you're interested in, I'll pull together some more information and some things that we have on it. And you can look through it. I'm happy to try to discuss or answer any more questions, but I do know it's something that is going on to some degree. I think we wish it would happen more, but I think with a lot of these things, hopefully baby steps lead to bigger steps.
Thanks, Jeff. That would be great.
Well, it certainly takes time to change a trend, and the green thick lawn of Bermuda grass or Kentucky blue, like you say, it's a trend, and you need to retrain somehow that a different trend may be better. Quickly on this, Jeff, how do you answer to somebody that says, spreading fertilizer is no different than spreading straight up cow manure? Same amount of nitrogen.
Andy, could you repeat that? I think my computer may have froze up there.
All right. How do you answer to somebody, Jeff, who claims, spreading today's fertilizers is no different than spreading straight up cow manure? Same amount of nitrogen. I mean, how do you answer to somebody like that? That just in a scientific way or that's understood?
Well, I think some of that, right, Andy, is not all cow manure is created equal, one for one. I mean, we don't necessarily know, and compost is the same way, right? You get compost from lots of different sources. You don't necessarily know the nutrient analysis of what that is, right? So if you get it tested and you know what it is, you know how much to apply, right? That's the one real benefit of a synthetic fertilizer is, if you get a bag that has an analysis on the outside of it, you know what you're getting. And in theory, if you apply it correctly, you know exactly how much you put down. Manure is not always like that, and compost is especially not always like that, depending on what's gone into the compost. But we encourage anyone, especially if they're getting their own manure or something that's there, get a little bit of it tested, find out what that analysis is, know how much you're putting down, and then you can kind of back calculate how much you're putting down. Because, probably in a pound per pound is probably not as much as a synthetic, depending on which kind it is. You don't really know what it is until you know what it is. So
that makes sense.
That's what we kind of encourage people to do. If people need a source to get soil tested or manure or compost tested, we're happy to connect them with UMass Extension, who does that kind of testing, or University of Connecticut Extension, or any host of places that do it. Most soil samples will run you about $25, and can provide you a lot of information about what you want to put down and what your soil is. So that's the best way to kind of look at that.
Thank you, Jeff. Board members, any more discussion? Fertilizer use? We'll move forward to the FDA shellfish taking prohibition in the mooring fields. Either Tara or Jeff, if you could. I recently, somebody texted me the map and they were like, WTF, I like to get my cohogs over at the horse shed. And I see the little spot there at the horse shed and the mouth of the cohog pond over there on First Point. What's the latest on these areas, Jeff?
Do you want me to take that, Tara? Or take that first? Okay. So just as a little bit of background on this, and I'll try to run through it, is apparently this new program from the FDA has been in the works for a couple of years now. And they've been talking with the Division of Marine Fisheries, and this just kind of rolled out to us. So we're doing a little bit of learning as we go too. And I completely agree that I like to get clams on the horse shed. And my friends do, and other folks do. So this is something that I think is important for all of us. But essentially what has gone on is the FDA has what they call the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, or you see it shortened a lot as just the NSSP. And what they're tasked with is obviously promoting the safe handling and consumption of shellfish, whether they're wild caught or farmed or harvested. But they're really tasked at providing safe shellfish for our consumption. And I think that's where this stems from. So what they've done is the FDA has rolled out this program where they have kind of made the blanket determination that any area that moors greater than 20 boats is considered to be contaminated for primarily for fecal coliform concerns in areas with 20 or more boats, because they believe that the risk of black and gray water discharge from those boats that could potentially cause bacterial outbreaks is significant enough to restrict shellfishing in those areas. So long story short, if you have 20 moorings in an area, those areas are closed to shellfishing until the moorings are out. So that's why when you look at like the map for Nantucket of the southern end of the harbor and the mooring field, it's conditionally approved because in theory, all of the moorings should be out of that area by October 1st. So it won't have a big restriction on this scallop season for October, November, December, January, February, March. Then those moorings go back in and it's closed. So that's the program that they sent to the Division of Marine Fisheries. The DMF was tasked essentially with looking at mooring fields for the Commonwealth, determining where there were greater concentrations than 20, and then determining where that area needed to be restricted, to make it not only easy for people to understand and not need chart plotters per se to like figure it out all the time, but to also provide those tools to enforcement so they know where it is and it's very clear in the field. And I think in this case, this is what's happened, where they've decided that based upon how far the mooring field goes out in Nantucket Harbor, that line from First Point runs across over to Pimonees and encapsulates the bulk of the mooring fields for that area. I think we have some concerns, obviously, that, for areas like Warren's Landing that are also impacted. And as they kind of look at the rest of the harbor, there may be other areas impacted by those mooring closures. We've asked a lot of questions to them. We're trying to gather information. It's kind of come to light in the last little period of time for me, after looking around a little bit more and finding some more info, even as late as this afternoon. It looks like they've had enough pushback nationally that there may be kind of a waiver provision that comes into communities so you can assemble information, whether it's like in our case, we have a federal no discharge zone. And if we can document, the gallonage that we pump out in relation to the number of boats, if there's additional water quality testing that we've done or we can do, that may be a way to petition for areas. And once they get the program in place, hopefully there's that way to then kind of come back to them and say, we want to have this area open, or we want to revisit the conditional approval for these areas to do, because it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think the horse shed in our case is really the perfect example, just for the fact that here you are, you're looking at arguably some of the cleanest water on Nantucket just for the high flushing that comes through the horse shed, some of our information that's there, that it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you're just looking at the aerial photograph and you're drawing boxes around mooring fields, and that's what you're tasked to do, and that's the information that you have at hand when you're doing it, I kind of understand where it's there. So we're trying, like I said, departmentally to put together, data on what percentage of boats, have heads, what gallonage do we pump out from all of the pump out facilities, whether it's the town pier, the boat basin, or the headhunter. What are we doing? How are we monitoring that? How are we, looking at it? Can we group moorings differently in more remote areas to not have 20 together and have, 2 or 3 smaller areas that meet the criteria? I think those are all things that we're looking to do to hopefully get some of the areas that we're concerned may be restricted, and some of the areas that are currently restricted back open. And I think we've kind of taken the stance, and Tara can certainly jump in if she feels a little differently on it. But I think we're taking the stance that we want to challenge the determination to the point where they have to tell us no again. And that when they tell us no again, to just keep going and saying, well, this is why it's important. Here's more data on what we're doing, or what else can we do to get it open? And then say, we're doing it now. Let's get it open, and kind of push until we can get the areas that we feel can be open and safely open, open for people to use. And we're trying to figure that out. I know we're trying to contact our local kind of branch of the FDA to try to set up a time to talk to them about the program and find out if there's something that we can do more, kind of from the horse's mouth there. But I know we're committed to trying to get that open, hopefully as quickly as we can, or like I said, fight it until they tell us we can't fight it anymore. I think that's what we'd like to do, and kind of what we're going to endeavor to do in the near future. And I know for the closure out in Mattocket, we're even going as far as starting to do some bacterial source tracing, where we actually go collect water samples, and if there's fecal in the water, we get that tested at a DNA level to determine whether it's from humans or other warm-blooded mammals or from birds, to know where it's coming from. And so if we can say, oh, it's from humans, we can ratchet back and say, well, let's look at the septics right adjacent to there, and then scale back and see if we can find a problem that may be causing the problem. But we're efforting to get any piece of information that we can to help solve the puzzle, to get these areas back open or with less restrictions, or if, the conditional approval can lengthen and maybe you're just closed during the really warm weather months, where you're really worried about some of those, bacteria being able to multiply more readily in warmer water. But we really want to try to get it to as little as possible, and be able to make them, again, have better data to make a better decision, because we feel like a lot of these areas don't need to be closed, but just gonna try to demonstrate that fact. So I don't know if Tara has anything more she wants to add in, but hopefully I didn't really forget too much. Or if she doesn't have anything to add in, that's great too, because I don't remembered everything. So
I think you covered it all, Jeff. So yeah, I mean, I think we're just trying to build our case against these closures and show that Nantucket is proactive with a lot of our programs and initiatives, so that we can, keep the access and keep everything open. Because, I definitely don't agree with just blanket closures, because the risk may or may not be there. So it's something that we're working on.
Do they have a distance requirement from said 20 moorings or more?
they do. It's a little unclear for how they determine that to some degree, and some of it has to deal with the style of water body and things that are there. So those are some of the questions that we've put back to them for how they determine those groups of 20, and then what's I hate to say it this way, what's the bubble around the 20 that's the closure? You know, is it 100 yards? Is it 100 feet? Is it, 1,000 feet? You know, how is that clearly determined to set it? And I think I understand the mapping purposes of determining like easy geographical points to be able to say, if I look to my left and see First Point, I look to my right and see Pimline's Point while I'm out there, I know if I look like I'm past that or not. I understand that, but I also think that you can accomplish those same things and make it easy for people. And I know we're willing to do it, to say, if that line comes back, if we have to set a line of buoys across the harbor that say no shellfishing, and we advertise that line and know where it is and say, if you're on this side of it, you're good, and on this side, you're not. I I think if that gets more areas open, we'll absolutely effort to do that. I think anything that we can do to help keep that area as minimal as possible is what we look to do, and really to base those closures on actual science and water quality data and actual reason for concern, and not, well, there's a boat there, it must be dumping black water into the water and causing this problem, when we know it's not, because we're here and we can see it and we can test it and know that it's there, and it's not, like I said, looking at an aerial photo and drawing, boxes around mooring balls and saying, well, it's closed because we think there's too many boats. So again, I think that's what we're hoping to do.
All right. Any particular way to monitor at least like the horse shed area? I know there's been, over the past several seasons, there's been a lot of cormorant activity. They roost in areas around there, and for years the geese have nested on many of the points. I'm just wondering if there's any obvious bird activity that could be a detriment to that. I call it the quahog pond at First Point there. And I haven't been around there in a long time. I know that the access to that area is much more difficult for vehicles, and actually it's always closed, and really sketchy to get around there anyway, with the way the tides have taken away the beach, and that trench that fills that pond is an awful muddy one that is highly unsuggested to try to cross with a vehicle, to say the least. But I'm just curious if, like, if Tara could have a camera at her building and be able to keep an eye on that area in a way that shows that there's very, very little activity there. But as far as wildlife goes, there could be more activity than I or anybody else is aware of without some constant monitoring. Just curious, because that's the one place on the map that has actually drawn a lot of attention, as it has for you yourself, Jeff. So we appreciate you being on the ball with that, and trying to come up with facts versus just guesswork. So but as you
Trust me
already,
when I say, if you think you guys are getting a lot of phone calls about it, we are getting like 10 times the amount of, I mean, just today alone, I heard JC take 3 calls on it. I had 2. I mean, I had Jan Jellamy in my office yesterday for 20 minutes talking about the closures and what was going on. So it's a real concern, and it's a big deal. I mean, it's no one likes to be told they can't do anything, and I especially don't like it when I don't feel like it's determined through the best means possible, and would love to get it resolved, just for peace of mind for all of us, for making sure that they're making decisions with the best information, not just the information that they have. I would rather give them good data to make that decision. If they come to the same determination with it, I'll at least feel better that it's something that they've determined through, proper analysis, and not, kind of blanket rules. So
all right. Well,
we'll see.
I'll be sure to share the message with anybody else that asks that your department's working diligently on this, and it sounds like you're on the side of the fishermen as long as things are certainly safe.
Again,
Thank you.
I think the good news is that it doesn't look like it's going to affect base scalloping in the fall. So that's one good plus. But I mean, I think it's more than just even the commercial guys. Obviously, those are areas that are accessible to everybody, and they're easily accessible to a lot of people. And it's a great spot to get people that aren't into shellfish involved and interested in the harbor. Um, and it's, I mean, the horse shed alone is an awesome spot, but I think as we see other areas, if they get lumped into this too, that any place that we can have shore-based access for shellfishing is a bonus, and it's a real loss to lose any of those areas that people can drive the car, walk 100 yards, go out, get some shellfish for dinner, and then go home. It's just, we spend a lot of time and effort, trying to keep the water clean and doing it, and that's just not our department, but island wide. That it's a shame for any of that to be taken away and out of our hands when it doesn't necessarily need to be.
Mr.
Mr.
Brady,
Chairman. Oh, sorry.
you'll be next.
Um,
Ginger.
So
Okay.
it's just that area. I mean, it doesn't do anything to take in steamers, because a lot of people, our season is September 15th to June 15th. So a lot of people do steamers up harbor and in Mattocket, and and all of Mattocket is open to cohogging, and it's, so maybe it comes down to people's personal preference to going to a certain area. It's like, when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service took over Great Point, or, stepped out of a passive role and became active, and they fenced it off and told all the fishermen they couldn't fish on Great Point, and everyone's freaking out. But, the bluefish and the striped bass are all around the island. So, if you really want to go get shellfish, you can go get them. You may not go get them where you want to get them, but.
Well, the shallow water in the horse shed is very convenient. If people get into a habit of going to a certain place, like you
Sure.
say,
Yep.
and of course you have to deal with the entitlement attitude, which can be more of a
Yeah.
negative end of things. But I suggested to the three people who mentioned to me, I mean, my dad always used to take us in First Bend, just in front of Eric Nod's old shack, which is just around First Point from the horse shed. But the water's deeper there, and maybe they're not as plentiful there. But I'd like to think that they still exist there. So yes, we're fortunate that there are certainly still places that shellfish can be harvested. Ginger.
Oh, I'd just like to offer the observation that computer algorithms love to draw polygons, and it doesn't necessarily mean that, that a human has evaluated the data before it's plugged in. So go to it, Jeff. Good work. Thank you so much.
Yes. Good. Nice. Thank you. Anybody else on this topic? The FDA shellfish taking prohibition in the mooring fields. Not seeing any water quality testing during second year of no Fagawi reminder. Mr. Brace.
Yeah, I was just, I don't know. I just brought this up. I just put it on the agenda because we want to make sure that we're testing while those guys aren't here, so we have another year, a second year of data. That's all. And I know that the water quality testing will be going on by then. So I just wanted to make note of that. That's all.
And I have the same feelings, and I thought the same last year prior to COVID. Wow, the harbor will have less pressure on it this year, but it turned out the mooring field seemed to fill up sooner than usual, and people lingered on later than usual. So I think our harbor probably had more use than in the past, even without Fagawi being there. I don't know how well that is measured, but it's certainly something to be hopeful about, at least, that there could be room for improvement just from less use. Any opinions or comments from staff on this? Tara or Jeff?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and do that. I think there's a lot that we're learning from the COVID year biologically. And, I agree that I feel like there was a slightly more pressure on the harbor as there were more people using it, just to be outside because there wasn't any other place to go. So I think, testing it, which we will be doing twice in June, right after Fagawi. I'm not sure what Thais's exact dates are because they're lined up with the tide, but that should definitely, tell us a lot.
Thank you, Tara. You guys have a lot of stuff on your radar there. Board members, any questions, comments on this topic? Not seeing or hearing any, we'll move to new business. The Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee meeting recap. Several of us attended that meeting. I just thought we'd put this on in case anybody had any discussions, thoughts, ideas to share. This is a huge moving target with a lot going on. I think any useful input is helpful for the final plan. Board members, Mr. Bossy.
I think my big takeaway was was what they're doing in the vineyard, kind of a comprehensive dredging that they can move it around, they can have location, they can do different things. I think it's really something we've got to look at. If Dave was here, I'm sure Franzuto, I'm discussing about it. Anyway, that was my big takeaway. I thought that biggest things we can be looking at. A lot of things we could do with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of places it doesn't need to be.
Yes. Mr. Brace, Ms. Andrews, anything to add?
I just
Well, sorry, go ahead, Peter.
no,
Here.
Ginger, you go ahead, Ginger.
All right, Ginger.
Well, I was just going to say that, I had some thoughts after the presentation. I thought it was a great presentation about some of my concerns about the birds and whatnot. I think when I listen to these, engineering types talk, their thinking is dry land thinking, and what they're not considering is just the sheer energy that is transmitted by water. And I just I don't know, Peter, if they've put in a lot of time studying historic shorelines and tracking effects of storms and wind direction and so on, but that's all important data to help us know what we're preparing against, because there's the day-to-day back and forth, and then there's also the big the big changes when something you didn't expect falls in or suddenly builds out. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Well, Mr. Chairman, at the beginning of the process, right now the process is much more active, and we passed the halfway point and solutions are being worked on, and we've had the midway point report, but before all that, we spent a lot of time defining what our mission was and essentially making sure that the consultants would have all of the reports, all the things that they needed to read to know what we knew. Because if you look at the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, it's a bunch of experts in different aspects of island life on Nantucket. So, and everybody knows of some report or some research, and we all, trust me, Ginger, they have all the reports. They're being paid to read them and understand them, and they're not going to recommend action items based on just hearsay. They're anyway. Arcadis is not going to go and do its own studies. They're relying on us to tell them what we want to do based on what we know. So, yes, they did their homework. How's that?
That's good. Thank you.
And then I wanted to add, the thing that, and I spoke about it at that meeting on the 27th. It kind of goes off of Andy's, excessive sand and scallops and dredging plan. I just thought that, as the water comes up and CO2 becomes segmented and more water comes into the harbor, that's the thing that I just have to concern about. And I'm glad the Inquirer Mirror finally did a story about it. But, CO2 is our natural barrier that protects everything. And as we learned at that meeting, the trustees of reservations and the Nantucket Conservation Foundation are sort of working together on how to protect their properties in a natural way, in a sensitive way, and that has a great bearing on our lives on Nantucket Harbor, on scallopers being able to scallop it all. If we don't have CO2, we have open ocean breaking on the inner harbor and the pier and the boat basin. And so I just think that is hugely important. How are we going to do that? How are we going to protect that? How are we going to, or do they not want to protect it because it's a natural process? And if it washes away, it washes away. But that's because that's what islands and native sand do. So I just felt that part of the discussion was hugely important. It impacts the whole harbor.
All right, Peter, keep us posted on when there's another meeting.
I will.
Thank you. Anybody else on this topic? Not seeing any. Any questions, comments from the public, if there's any in present? Not seeing or hearing any. Any board members would like to add anything for next meeting? Our next meeting will be June 1st. Then after that, June 15th. So once again, think about our summer schedule, election of officers, and possibly going back to in-person meetings. And we'll visit those topics at our next meeting. And if there's nothing else for tonight, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman. This is Ginger.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Motion's made by Ginger Andrews, seconded by Dave Bossy to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor, Mr. Brace?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye as well. Thanks for being here, Jeff and Tara. Filling us in, keeping us up to date. Really appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful couple of weeks.
Thanks.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.